Welcome to the Level Up Leader Podcast. My name is Michael King. I'm an executive coach that serves visionary leaders who lead some of the best teams in the world. Today, I'm joined by one of my new friends. His name is Ralph Velasco. Ralph is a world traveler extraordinaire. He's an entrepreneur. He's a talented photographer and also tour guide. He has taken all of his talents and uniquely combined everything together for an experience that people will never forget. He is the host of a brand new show called the Continental Drifter. You can find it on YouTube, and he takes people all over the world to experience things that nobody else can do. So would you please welcome Ralph Velasco to the Level Up Leader Podcast. Ralph Velasco, welcome to the Level Up Leader Podcast. Thanks for making time for us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So looking through your bio and just kind of getting caught up on the things that you're passionate about and what you actually do for a living, I actually said to you when we first started our conversation today, man, it looks like you have an incredible existence, my friend. Why don't you give us a little bit of the 10,000 foot view about, who you are, what makes you tick, what are you passionate about, and what are you doing now?
Sure. So I've always been an entrepreneur. So for the most part, I've always had my own businesses throughout my career. And right now I organize and lead small group international tours around the world. I have two travel brands. One is Photo Enrichment Adventures, and it's a little bit more photography focused, but I kind of shot myself in the foot years ago when I named the company that some people feel like you have to be a photographer, you have to have a certain kind of camera, and that's just not true with these trips. These aren't photo workshops where it's 12 hours a day, every sunrise, sunset photography. So these are very casual, and I created these trips as sort of a hybrid between, I would call it a photo tour, which isn't quite a photo workshop, but that and a regular trip. So I designed it so that you could, perhaps you're interested in photography and your spouse isn't, both of you would have a great time on those photo enrichment adventures. Photography is just a small part of it. We're not spending 3 hours taking a picture of every flower along the way. Even I don't want to do that. But who doesn't want to be out in beautiful lights at the right time of day, before the tourist crowds and before the heat of the day, before the pickpockets are out. So that's what the photo enrichment adventures are. And then I recently created a brand called Alla Campagna Experiences. And Alla Campagna means to the countryside in Italian. And Campagna is actually my mother's maiden name as well. So it's a little bit of a double meaning there. But I created those trips, which are different in that instead of seeing a big part of a country or a region of the world, we do a deep dive focus on a smaller part and do much more of a cultural immersion. And so we spend the entire trip in one, maybe two locations. And instead of, like I said, going around an entire country or region and spending 8 hours in a vehicle, getting from place to place, we pack and unpack once, and then we do little day trips that might be 30 minutes to an hour away. And so real casual. So like on my France's magical Dordogne trip, we stay at an 11th century castle on 270 acres of grounds. The property itself is a destination. It's like a museum, and there's hiking and beautiful gardens and things, because sometimes we can't wait to leave the hotel. You feel like you're wasting time if you're sitting at the hotel, but if it's an 11th century castle or a wine estate or an agriturismo or some other incredible property, you may not want to be on the go all the time because you're already there. So that's the idea of the two different travel brands. And even more recently, I created a YouTube channel called the Continental Drifter, where I share travel and photography tips for baby boomers and Gen X travelers. So a little bit older, like 40s plus type travelers. Those are the kind of people that come on my trips.
Oh, that's fun. What would you say is probably one of your favorite trips that you host?
Yeah, that's like asking what my favorite child is, but I don't have any children. No, everyone I create is, of course, a little bit of a piece of me, but, and I get a lot. I've got all 5-star reviews for my trips. So I always joke that, what's my favorite destination? The next one. But some of my favorite trips that I've created are the Treasures of Armenia and the Republic of Georgia, which is somewhat off the beaten path, but very accessible place. Absolutely fantastic. Not a lot of people are going there. Simply gorgeous countries, and food is out of this world. Wonderful people, very inexpensive prices. So that's a wonderful trip. Mexico's Copper Canyon's bigger and deeper than the Grand Canyon, has one of the great train rides of the world right through it. Mexico's only passenger train in the whole country goes up and down Copper Canyon. And like I say, it's bigger and deeper than the Grand Canyon, and hardly anyone's ever heard of it. And it's just like 3 hours south of the border here.
Oh, wow.
So that's a real special trip. It's very much off the beaten path, but accessible and really kind of exotic and unique.
That's fascinating. So what was the inspiration behind this? Like, how did you get started?
Yeah, I've always been a traveler since high school. When I was 15, I studied in Spain for a summer. The next summer, I was a volunteer in Peru. The next summer, I volunteered in Venezuela for about 2 months. The next summer, I studied in Mexico City. So I'd always been a traveler since a fairly young age, and kind of on my own. And I've always enjoyed photography, but it was back then, which was, middle to late 80s. It's kind of like figuring out how to make a living from travel was about as likely as my becoming a rock star, And so back then we didn't have the internet, social media, and all these, smartphones and iPhone apps and things like that make travel so much easier today. And back in 1988, I sold my first restaurant when I was 24. And I said, before I do anything else, I'm going to buy a round the world ticket. And so I bought a ticket for a round the world trip. I ended up going to 15 countries on 5 continents over 5 months, mostly by myself. And of course, one of the great experiences of my life. And so that kind of set the stage. And then just to fast forward a little bit, I had my second restaurant from 2001 to 2004. And I was getting ready to, I was coming to the end of my initial 3-year lease, and I either had to sign for another 5 years or decide if I was going to sell or what. And I opened the business in May of 2001. And then in September of 2001, we all know what happened. We had 9/11, and here I was in the heart of downtown Chicago, and everyone thought that Chicago's next, and because they were going after the big cities and things. So business really died, and but I introduced catering, kind of came back, but I was done, and I just said, you know what? I always tell the story of taking out a legal pad, and on the left side, I wrote the cons of what I was doing. So I had to have a $5,000 a month rent on my restaurant. I needed employees. I came home smelling like a French fry. I was selling stuff that people were putting in their mouths and consumed and could potentially make them sick. And I said, you know what? What are the opposite of those things? Well, I want to work from wherever my laptop is. I want to work for myself. I don't want employees. I want to take a shower before work, not after. And, all those things. And this was at the dawn of digital photography. And so I said, I bet people would pay me to learn how to use these new digital cameras that were on the market coming out. The 1 megapixel cameras, remember those? And
oh, yeah.
And so I decided to create some walking tours. And I was still living in Chicago, but I decided that the weather, probably made the season cut by 25 to 50%. And so I was looking for a way to move back to California, which I'd lived there before. And I said, okay, that's the kind of climate where you can do this year round. And a buddy of mine said, why don't you come on out and work for me, get your financial advisor's license. You could work for me. And I said, well, at night and on weekends, I could start teaching photography. And so, that's kind of what I did.
Man, that's massive. And now you're obviously an entrepreneur. You chase down brand new ideas and pursue your passions on this. So that's amazing. At some point in time, every leader kind of comes face to face with this idea that maybe they have to level up their own personal leadership, their own personal impact. Maybe it's a grand awakening. How about you? Do you have any moments like that?
Well, I believe maybe what you're going for. When I mentioned that I was a financial advisor, and that was from about 2005 to 2008. And we all know what happened in September of 2008. September is not a very good month for us, but that was the financial crisis. And so I had been doing that for 3 years. I was a newbie. I wasn't making hardly any money because it takes years and years to develop a book and, following. And my boss, who had been doing it for 25 years, saw his business go down 90%. So I said, you know what, so I'd been doing the nights and weekends tours and one-on-ones and teaching classes at local city of Newport Beach, et cetera. And I said, you know what, this is a sign. The next day I went full time as a travel photographer and international tour organizer. Now, I wasn't making a full-time living that next day, but I burned all the bridges and I said, you know what, I've got to make this happen. And it's funny what happens when you do that.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes we just need to have those catalytic moments to push us out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. So kind of coming down. So you got these travel companies, these photocentric tours. Love the ideas of this. I need to definitely check out your YouTube channel. Talk to me a little bit about, so when I asked you the question, like, what is your greatest level up leader tip? You talked about the idea of setting clear expectations and never over promising, but under promising and over delivering, right?
Yes.
So what's kind of a personal story that you have attached to that?
Yeah, I learned early on with the trips and the tours and walking tours that it was really important to set expectations, because we've all heard it, because it's kind of a, catchphrase right now, but you really need to niche down whatever it is you're doing. And sure, as a tour organizer, you want anyone, as new tour organizer, you want any and everyone to come on your trips, but people are going to come on trips where they either can learn something, or there's an activity like photography or learning a language or food. And so I learned early on that I needed to have some sort of a special interest. And so that was photography, of course. But I started to go after inadvertently, because I didn't actually, kind of realize what more professional photo workshop type photographers are like. And that's where I mentioned, it's 24/7 photography, mornings, sunrises, sunsets, one-on-ones, image reviews, talking photography at every meal. And that's fine if you want to do that, one time a year for 2 weeks for yourself. But when you are the leader of, say, 10 or 12 trips doing that, for me, it's too much. It wasn't what I was interested in. So that's when I kind of realized that I need to create that hybrid type of trip. And I call them cultural tours with a focus on photography. But again, I'm getting more and more people coming with no camera, with just a smartphone. I mean, we all have cameras in our pockets now, one way or the other. I'm shooting more with my smartphone, believe it or not, especially because I'm doing mostly video for my YouTube channel, and I'm shooting that with my iPhone. But to make a long story longer, back to your question, was that I was trying to, setting expectations. So once in a while, I would get someone on a trip that, for whatever reason, was expecting a different type of trip. And that's not good. You want people to know what they're in for. And either they filter themselves out because that's not what they're after. They want a photo tour. They don't want any photography or whatever. So being very upfront and letting people filter themselves out and know exactly what they're in for, and then under promising and over delivering that product, which for me is the tour itself.
I love this. I love it a lot. I see so much potential in what you're doing. I'd love to be able to just to brainstorm with some different creative ways to be able to get you in front of the right people as well. I love helping entrepreneurs that are kind of in your space. So I love your dream and your vision. So congratulations on nailing that down. Now, if people wanted to be able to get in touch with you or take a look at your content, how would they do that?
Sure. So right now I've got 3 websites, and believe me, I'm trying to narrow that down, but I've got the photoenrichment.com for the photo enrichment adventures. I've also got allacampagna.com, and perhaps you could put links in the show notes at some point if there are, but also that's at allacampagna.com, and those are really just the trips that are based around the Mediterranean, Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal right now. I'm working on Sicily, Greece, some other Mediterranean focused trips. And then I've got continentaldrifter.co. And so that's more the umbrella, and I'm looking to bring those other 2 brands underneath the Continental Drifter brand and then just have everything in that space. But I don't know if I've succeeded, but my idea was not to confuse my clients any more than they already are with the new brand and the Continental Drifter. So it's been a learning experience, but I do everything 100% myself. So, you do what you think is right when you do it. And so we don't always make the right decisions.
I think it's super interesting. And you have a very, very generous offer as well to everybody who's listening to this podcast. So it's for everybody who's actually listening here today. If you want to check out any of the websites that he mentioned, those are links in the show notes as well. So make sure to check those out. But Ralph is offering $200 off an individual for any multi-week trip in 2023, or $500 off per couple as well. So, man, I love it. Now, Ralph, you are an active member in the Level Up Leader Facebook group, and so we'll give you a huge shout out there. And I'm also, just to encourage everybody who's listening to this right now, make sure to hop into the Facebook group and ask Ralph to share some, any questions that you have about trips coming up. And Ralph, if you want to, go ahead and drop some trips that you want to make available to our listeners when this goes live, and let's do something together. I think it'd be really fun to partner on something for the group.
Absolutely. That would be great. And, just some of the trips that I have coming up are a taste of northern Portugal, which is Porto in the Douro Valley. Wonderful trip. So we do a lot of, especially the Alla Campagna experiences, but on all my trips, we do a lot of wine tasting and food. I make a very big part of our trips because, after the people, there's nothing more, specific to a place than its food culture. And I go to some of the best food cultures in the world, like India, Vietnam, Armenia, Georgia, which maybe aren't known for their food, but they should be. Absolutely fantastic. And then all these other countries, but Mexico, Colombia, et cetera. So I'd be glad to do that for sure. And please take me up on that offer for the $200 and $500 off. I would love to have you along.
Fantastic. Ralph, thank you for joining us on the Level Up Leader podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on the Level Up Leader podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps to get the word out. And make sure to like, subscribe, and to follow so you get all of the episodes. A special thank you to my friends, Names Without Numbers, for allowing us to use their music. We decided that we wanted to feature music that I've personally been involved with in the studio, so I think that's pretty great. To find out more about everything that we're up to, please check us out at www.teams.coach. And don't forget to join our Facebook group at www.teams.coach/levelupleaders.